Okay, so you have elected to listen to the commentary for these models. There is a commentary-less version that I've already uploaded. If you didn't want to listen to me, which I completely would understand. But, alright, so what this is I, for a time, was into making these video game dioramas in Blockbench for a while. It was 3 resources. First, the inspiration was from Brandon James Greer on YouTube. A link will be in the description. He is the one that showed me how Blockbench works and started putting these like simple models together. Then there's Blockbench itself, free program. A little bit of a learning curve, but I feel like, at least from what I'm doing, is pretty simple. And probably just as important is a website called the Spriters Resource, which is all the sprites I use to put these together. And when talking about a few, you'll see what I'm talking about. When sometimes it's hard to like put something together that you had an idea for. This is also entirely non-scripted, unlike my Chrono Cross review. So we're just gonna kind of run with it and see how it goes. Okay, so starting off, the first model I made was a diorama of specifically the Chrono Trigger box art, which, as you know, has a lot of inconsistencies from the actual game. Marl doesn't cast fire magic, you don't fight Heckran in 12,000 BC, whatever. But it was just a fun little proof of concept to know that I'm learning, right? So, moving on to Final Fantasy V. Big fan of the 4-Job Fiesta, and I wanted to do something kind of at least related to that. And this is the fight with Gilgamesh on the bridge, where, the best song in, Final Fantasy history plays. But I specifically picked the job classes based on things that I thought were relevant, like Berserker for, there's a theme with Berserkers in the 4-Job Fiesta. Also, Farah is a summoner, and she's summoning Sealdra, which is, her little seafaring companion. Also love Gilgamesh and just thought this was a fun model to make. The background actually doesn't go that high. I had to recreate a bunch of it to make it reach the top of, Gilgamesh and Sealdra. But, yeah, that's 5. Moving on to one of the Final Fantasy VI models I did. The Sabin suplexing a train has always been like a big, meme that I always enjoyed. So I thought I would try to recreate it in Blockbench. And this is probably one of the more simplistic models out of all of them. But I did add some flair. Like the ghost that can join you temporarily is under the train, and I included Interceptor behind Shadow. And they're actually using the surprised look, because they don't actually react when Sabin does this. So it's just a little bit of creative whatever added to it. Moving on, DKC2. One of my favorite songs in the game is Sticker Brush Symphony, so I wanted to pick one that was one of those levels. I added the brambles as there's a slight layer between the sky and the background brambles and the foreground brambles. So and I also hid a DK coin in the background just because I was like, I felt like I wanted to fill the space in there. I also tried to make it so that the ground brambles merged into the brambles that Dixie is standing on. So there's a little bit of play in there to try to get that looking someone, whatever. Moving on to Star Fox. I thought this one was fun to make. I tried to recreate the HUD, and I also put a horizontal element in there, which was the blasters. The blaster blasts themselves. There wasn't a resource for that, so I had to create that just from what I think it would look like in game if it were like this. Another little Easter egg, Pepe's line of do a barrel roll, he doesn't say that in this game. That's in 64, but I just thought I'd put that in there just because it's, funny. Also, I think, honestly, of like all the things I could have recreated, these spaceships in this like vector style graphics would have probably been the easiest to actually recreate in 3D. And if I were to do this again, I'd probably actually try to recreate all these models in actual 3D instead of just using 2D sprites. Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Yeah, I don't think there's much to say about this one. I put each character on their own plane and gave them some kind of like element. Tails I really didn't know, so I just put like, you know, something to indicate he's higher in the air. Yeah, and it was really simple. Since it's a 2D plane, like Sonic, the loop and the rings are all just one flat 2D image. It's one element in there. But I think the result is, it still gives a pretty good result in the end. All right, Earthworm Jim. This is a fun one because I wanted to, the way the ground like kind of fizzled out into fog, I just wanted to try to leave that. That normally is kind of up over the level when you're playing and is super transparent, not opaque. And I just thought I'd try to use it as a ground element while putting a lot of the parts of the level on top of itself. So like the climbable rope in the background and the foreground with all the power-ups, and the lawyer with, that's all just kind of trying to condense a lot of what is in that level into this one diorama. And next is Yoshi's Island. Now this one, it was fun trying to pick a part of the game because there's a lot of cool set pieces in Yoshi's Island, but the one that actually is like perspective based is the final fight. So I thought I would just do that. I did take the time to separate the clouds and the moon from the actual background, just to give it a little bit more depth. And yeah, pretty much all the elements of the fight are present. It's, yeah, there you go. So, Illusion of Gaia. I really, really liked this one. Just because I'm a big fan of the game in general, and I like all the characters, but what I particularly liked about this was the fact that I could take and put all three characters on screen at once. So Frieden, Will, and Shadow. I can't remember what the final form is called. But it's just a cool thing to see everything at once. Also, the tiled floor is actually raised up a little bit. So there's a slight... You can't really see it from the angle it is, but this is just the dimensional space in all three characters. And I just think it turned out pretty good. Mario RPG. Like, that's another game that has a lot of things you could pick from. But ultimately, I just decided to go with the Colex optional boss fight. What's interesting about this is that it was an isometric kind of 45-degree angle game, so when it's head on, it actually sets up and like looks like the isometric like 45-degree stuff. But when it's rotating like this, it's harder to like see that perspective. But I also wanted to make sure that, you know, all the characters were doing something they would do in combat. So, like, you know, Peach is healing, Mario's attacking with the lazy shell. Also, the message might look a little blurry where Colex is talking, but that is because I ripped that from... on Spider's Resources, there was no, like, text sampler or, you know, text field. So I just had to kind of, like, make do. The same thing for the suplex in Final Fantasy VI. Moving on to Turtles in Time. Love that game, and I wanted to have this cool set piece where it had all the turtles mid-shredder fight, and I tried to get everybody doing something, and I had to have, you know, somebody doing the my toe thing, so sorry Nike, you're the funny one, so you got elected for that. And it ended up being an incredibly wide model, but I think in the end it turned out being real good and represents the fight well. Moving on to Mega Man X. This one was really cool. It's really simple. I try to recreate the stage as best I could, like the ground and the floor. The floor doesn't exist, so I had to create textures of what I think the floor would have looked like using the wall samples. So I tried to, make as much of a field as possible. Making Zero's cage, using separate elements for the little electric things. And also, I just wanted to have Mega Man throwing out the Hadouken, which is, kind of a secret thing that everybody knows about, but yeah. Moving on to Pocky and Rocky, one of my all-time favorite, SNES games. I really like how I angled the attacks from the Dark Mantle, going down to the characters, and the characters going, Rocky's leaves going up to him. I also, getting the walls right was also a little finicky. And again, I had to, use some, creativity to create the walls, because there aren't any, really, sides, so I had to recreate the sides, as well as, the best I can describe it is reverse chronolations at the very bottom. But ultimately, I think it turned out really good. I just added some power-ups just because the actual fight without anything else was a little, felt a little empty. So I just threw some of the game's power-ups around just to liven it up. Alright, so moving to Super Metroid. This is the first time I really started working with transparencies. So Kraid's over here in the lava, right? And I wanted to give the illusion that, that it's actually lava and he's under there and you can see what's under the lava, right? Now there is some layer prioritization you have to do to make it so that the transparency actually works. If you don't do it right, things behind the transparency will be invisible. And it took me a while to figure that out. And another thing is the background that I used isn't the correct one for this fight. For some reason, Spriter's Resources didn't have the background for where you fight Kraid, but I was like, yeah, I'll take it. And also I wanted to have a version of Kraid that was in the middle of dying where his flesh is sawing off. And the whole thing's just cool. I also like the little grappling points on the ceiling. Wanted to make sure to include those. And overall, I'm really happy with this model. I think it of all the places in Super Metroid, this one is probably, I feel like anybody who played Super Metroid, the Kraid jump scare after the boss fight is probably one of the most memorable points of the game. So, I don't know. That's why I settled on that. Moving down to Earthbound. So, I wanted something to include, a lot of everything from the game. Or at least important things. So I wanted to have Dr. and Donuts. I wanted his time machine. I always liked Saturn Valley, and I wanted to put the characters in a way that was somewhat represented that character in game. So Pooh is over there meditating by the water. Ness is over there riding his bike, and Jeff is talking to Dr. and Donuts. Probably about nerdy stuff. I also included, I scattered around some of the Mr. Saturns for funsies. I put the dad phone up there in the corner just because I was like, whatever. It's a goofy game. It's gonna be a goofy model, but all the walls and levels and stuff. This is actually a place in Saturn Valley. I didn't just create that just from nothing. That is actually a wall that I just created the depth from the 2D image, and those actually do take a long time, and I start doing that a little bit more as we get further into these models. Okay, Dreamland 3, and speaking of, I took just a level, found a place where it had just some blocks in multiple levels just to give me place to put things, because I wanted to create a scene that was interesting, right? So I set up so that all the buddies were there, and either they're doing something or something is being done to them, right? So Choo Choo's being jealous that Rick has Kirby on the umbrella, and Kine. I didn't have water, right? So I didn't know what to do with Kine, but I remembered his stupid plunger power up. So I'm like, well, I mean, I could just stick them to the side of a cube. I don't know, like, whatever. But I think it did a good job of representing everyone. Also, that is GUI that is shocking the enemy, not Kirby. So that was how I got GUI into the model as well. So everybody should be represented. Moving on to A Link to the Past. There was many opportunities to pick some cool scenes from Link to the Past, and I mean, I very easily could go back and make some more, but this is Trinex is what I ultimately settled on. I like how the spikes, the spike blocks turned out. I mean, they're just squares, like whatever. But what I think is interesting is that I wanted to separate the boss from the shell and the heads. So I actually created what I think the boss looks like without his shell before he turns into the snake after, you know, you break his everything off and he turns into a snake. So, in the sprite sheet, there's actually, like, in the model, you can just turn off the shell, because you can see I put some feet under there, but you can't really see the whole thing. But, yeah, this is just I think a good representation of the fight. Like, the two heads don't ever attack you at the same time, but it makes a good, you know, like, action pose or whatever. And that was what I chose for Link to the Past. Now, moving on to Secret of Mana. It's not a complicated model, but it's still one of my favorites. And I'm not entirely sure why. I just think it looks clean. I like the representation of the wall. And the spikes that it's slowly pushing you into as well. Like, I didn't know how dense to go with the spikes, but I knew that I wanted several rows. And I also was like, all right, what weapons do I want to have characters use, and what, or spells, if any. So I just had Prim casting a healing spell while Randy and Popoi were attacking the wall. I thought using the bow and whip would be interesting, because I could use a more horizontal setup for those as they attack each eye. And I don't know, I really like how this model turned out. Super Mario Brothers 3. So this is one I've periodically been trying to work in the logo to the game in these models, and you'll see later on I find a more elegant solution than what I'm using here. This is actually not what the logo actually looks like. I had to shrink it to fit on this diorama particularly. And, you know, chose the final fight, which I think is cool. But what I think is funny is, so Bowser's doing his, you know, butt smash, right? That sprite of Mario is never used in game. Him looking up like that is only in the intro before you start your game. So I thought that was, but I think it ended up looking really funny, having that, him just looking up like, huh. But yeah, also creating the door, you know, once you win, you have to go through the door. There wasn't a lot of, like, the backside and sides of it were actually kind of hard to create, because, you know, again, it doesn't exist, so I had to create the texture for it myself using, you know, what existed. Moving down to Final Fantasy Tactics. This is another one that's actually way more simplistic than it looks. And I absolutely love how this turned out. Like, it shows all the jobs fighting Ultima. And Ultima doesn't have an attack that's these, like, little moats that go around the... You know, that doesn't exist. But I having everything there, just the jobs and her, I felt like something was missing, so I tried to create some kind of attack that would, you know, represent what you know, some kind of action scene with all the jobs there. But I think it's a really cool representation of kind of the game in general. Also, I think this was my first PS1 game that I tried to recreate, and I don't know, it just looks really good. Happy with it. Moving on to Symphony of the Night, one of my favorite games of all time. I wanted to depict a memorable fight, and this is where you fight Richter. And since he's jump kicking the orb, you know that he got the gold ring, silver ring, spike breaker armor, all the stuff necessary to go through the, you know, to get this ending, to get the glasses, you know, so you can see it. Of note, this is the first time I started trying to recreate in 3D objects that actually were in 3D, namely the crosses. When I first started putting this together, I just had 2D like representations of the front of the cross, but you know, after like looking at it a while, I'm like, I think I can do something better, right? So when Richter does his item crash, there a bunch of these 3D crosses are spinning around. So I tried my best to just recreate it, and I think it might as well just be from the game. Like, oh, also, there is no floor texture. There's no carpet or any kind of floor texture in that game because it's perfectly side view. So I had to like just create what I think the carpet would look like. I ended up just picking a color that was similar to the top of the wall of the carpet, and then throwing some textures on it using like white noise, just a noise filter over it to give it some kind of texture. But I think it turned out real good, and I think like before I mentioned it, you probably didn't even notice. So, and that's good. That's what makes me happy. I'd prefer that happen. Moving on to Secret of Evermore, another personal favorite on the SNES. I'm actually playing this currently with Jeremy on his channel, and it's like a nostalgic rush to go back into this game. I was a little worried. I had rose tinted glasses and just those would come off, and I'd realize that I don't like the game anymore, or that it's not as good as I thought it was. But so far, I'm still having a really good time with it. This is depicting the Thrax fight, and what was interesting is that I wanted a way to make sure his heart was a separate model, but inside the model that you could not see when it's sideways. So I ended up trying to recreate Thrax's like insides a little bit, and I feel like I didn't do a great job because it looks pretty angular and whatever. But when it's kind of rotating from the front, I feel like it does a great job of like showing the dimensionality of it, and the fight with the dog and whatever, and him trying to hit the heart with a bone. Also, when the model is backwards, that's the only time you can see the cocoon that what's his face is in that you're trying to save, something heart, Stoneheart or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I still like the game, and I still think that this is, it's just an iconic fight, and I was happy to make it again. So, this is technically, the last few are part of the part 2 set that I was posting to Imgur, and I was opening up suggestions for people to tell me what games they would like to see dioramas from. And somebody said Zelda 2, so I made Zelda 2. This one is far more like 3D dimensionalized, that's not a word, than a lot of the other ones. Like, I recreated everything, and it was interesting how far back the model goes when you consider how many levels there are, the 3 levels, not including the floor. Up to where Zelda's sleeping. If I were to add anything else, I would have added the Triforce pieces around Link. That's the only thing I think I missed out from this model. And I don't know why I didn't think about it, but like, yeah, I don't know. I think this turned out real good. Of all the places in the game that you could have made a diorama from, I believe this is probably the most iconic and most dimensional, and probably just the most interesting model that could have probably come out of it. And continuing on, another request I got was this NES game that I've never heard of called Faxanadu. And it seems like a pretty interesting game. But what I thought was the most interesting about this, and you'll see it from the backside of the model, there's like a crappy dead version, and then like a revitalized lively version. When you start the game, you walk into like town with everything looking dead and gross and whatever. But when you leave the game after beating it, you walk away from the town, everything's green, lush, waterfall, all that stuff. And I think this did a good job of like showing that off. But if I were to do this again, I probably would have actually like 3D-ized both sides so that it's not just flat on the gross side. But I mean, for a game that I never knew of, I feel like this turned out pretty good. Alright, back to Chrono Trigger, because, I mean, it's me. Yeah, I'm sure this doesn't surprise you. I wanted to recreate another fight, and this time it was the Queen Zeal fight at the end of the Black Omen. Now, I wanted to do something that represented a lot of the game at once. So I wanted to recreate a triple tech in the fight, and I wanted to actually like create it as genuinely as I could. So like there's a lot I could have just done like 2D representations of it, but like I thought Delta Force was a good way to like, and it's a simple shape, right? It's just a triangle, right? And also the little spell elemental things that go around the character that denote their element. While they only generally go one at a time, I made it so that all three were happening at the same time. It just adds a little extra flair. And it was cool to recreate the like space, the Black Omen and the kind of the space that you're fighting in. I did not know how to better do that than just like using the actual sprite from Sprite Resources for the Black Omen. Also, if you're actually playing Chrono Trigger, do not do this. If you cast any kind of AoE attack on Queen Zeal like this, 2 of the hands will counter and reduce your character's HP to 1. So this is a bad tactic. This is more of a visual representation. So there you go. Moving on, Shining Force 2, the best strategy RPG on the Sega Genesis. Great game, love this game. Again, this is another one that you could pull a lot of scenes from, but I feel like what was the most interesting was the Kraken fight, because you could just have all these tentacles. Normally, each tentacle is its own like enemy in the fight, but I was just like, let's just get the entire like Kraken in there, and of course Bowie defending the attack, and I think it turned out really good. And again, while there are a bunch of scenes, it was actually difficult to find some of the resources to create other ones. Like I was thinking about recreating the chessboard battle, because that's a pretty cool part of the game too, right? But I feel there was something that was preventing me, like there was missing sprites that prevented me from having the resources to make that. So settled on Kraken, and I think it looks cool. Alright, moving on to Fire Emblem Blazing Blade. This is the one with Lyn, and one of my favorite things about Fire Emblem is the critical animations, and Lyn has a really cool one where she basically, you know, this Nani behind me, thing. So I tried to recreate that as best I could, and it's simple. It's not a complicated model. It's just background, simple ground. I try to do that thing where it like how if you're standing on 2 different like tiles of ground, it's represented in the fight. So and then it was just putting the different sprites for that critical animation around the model. And it, like I said, it's simple, but I feel like it does a good job of representing like what that actual animation looks like. Moving on to The Lost Vikings, one of the original Blizzard games back before they made WoW and Diablo, which whatever. I mean, that's not a shot. I'm fine with that. But what a fun little platformer. Played this several times and played it in co-op with friends. It's just fun. Now, I kind of snuck in a reference to the LP that me and Jeremy did, where you'll see that Eric is falling into a pit of spikes because Olaf's shield is lowered, implying that he was going to run on top of Olaf's shield, and it was lowered like right as he would jump, meaning that he would just run directly into the spikes. And I did that a few times with Jeremy. It's just how do you not? How do you not? Right. Also, there's a cool little like depth thing that I did not mean to do that ended up looking good. It's the waterfall. You can actually see behind the waterfall a little bit. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting little piece of it. Street Fighter 2. This is actually a very simplistic one too. There are very few elements in this model. I don't ask me why Ken would be doing a Shoryuken like so far away from his opponent. No one would do that. But I just wanted like, a cool action scene. So like in this scenario, what would happen is, the Hadouken would absolutely knock Ken into the barrels. And, if I were to redo this, and I would probably make the barrels actually round 3D models instead of just 2D sprites. But whatever. I think it does a good job of representing like the game in general. It's cool seeing the boats. Like, whenever you're on the back side of it, of course, it's just a picture of a boat. But, like, when it's swinging around the front, you see the two boats kind of, like, interlacing. It gives a good effect. All right. DuckTales. I had to do the moon just for an excuse. Because, who doesn't love the moon theme? Like, that is just a classic. So, I ended up creating the first part of the stage where you're running around. Before you go into the ship. But I wanted to recreate the ship, at least in some part, so I had the way you get into it, where Scrooge is climbing up the chain to get in there. And there's Gizmo Duck down there fighting the boss, who absolutely doesn't show up at this part of the game. He's way at the bottom of the level. But again, I'm just taking some liberty to cram in more of what represents this game in this level here in the game, or in the diorama. So that was ultimately a cool set piece, because it's got the enemies that are in the stage, and a lot of the terrain that, like, the gap I believe is actually there in game 2. So I think it's a good. I probably would have tried to see how the leg of the ship is 2D. I'd probably try to create that as an actual cylinder or something if I were to go back and do something about it. Okay, moving on, and this is one of my favorite models. I probably have already said that around, but this is like legitimately one of my favorite models. It is Link's Awakening DX with I think it just includes as much of like what I think the game is in one place. So this is the Windfish's like egg, and this is at the end of the game where after you've collected all the instruments and are playing the ballad to get the egg to open. So I could have just made a 2D model of the egg, but I ended up trying to recreate the egg in 3D from scratch. Now, ultimately, I don't think it turned out super great, but I think it gets across what I was trying to do well enough. I think that the Windfish isn't present at this time, but just having him back there in the background, I think is cool. Also, the owl Kapora Gabora does show up for this, so I wanted Kapora Gabora to be there in some fashion, regardless if you hate the guy or not. Other notes, interesting notes: the instruments in this place, they all flash different colors. So, and if I were to take like a screenshot of that scene, all the instruments would be different colors or whatever. But I decided to use the color palette that they flash between and kind of designate a color for each instrument so that they look unique to, all the other ones, like as he's playing. Also, the steps going up to the egg, there was no sidewall to this. I had to find a texture in the game to create the sides of the steps going up. And just creating this mountain, actually, I don't think it was, if you look at the 2D representation of the mountain, it's actually impossible to create in 3D, so I had to take some creative liberties to get it to look the way it does. But I don't know. Out of all the models, I feel like this one probably like represents its game probably the best. And I don't know. This Link's Awakening is an awesome game, and I'm glad that this turned out the way it did. All right, and now moving on to one of the most complicated models. First of all, I'm just going to address the color. Not happy with the color. I wanted to use a green palette that kind of gave the implication of kind of like the green that Game Boy is, despite the fact it's more like a kind of like a yellow or whatever. But anyway, this is Mario's Mansion at the end of 6 golden coins. Now, I had to make a lot of assumptions about what this castle looked like. Because if you look at the image, all you get is like this perfectly in front of view. So like the sides, the crenellations, the pillars, like I had to make a lot of assumptions on what this actually looked like in 3D. Wario in the background just to, you know, fill out the Wario after he loses or whatever. Also, just for a little bit of flair, I recreated the titular 6 golden coins and put them above, you know, kind of the supporting pillars at each part of the castle. That's just because I wanted to add it, and it was, I don't know, just seeing the actual coins in actual 3D, it's interesting. But I'm really happy with how the castle turned out. And like, if I put the wireframe on this, there's a lot going on in this model. But I do like ultimately seeing what Mario's Mansion looks like in 3D. Yeah. But you'll see because I did Mario Land, and you'll see that I did grayscale with that, and I think the color looks better in grayscale than it does with this green palette. And moving back to Chrono Trigger, because I cannot help myself. This is the Inner Lavos fight, and I wanted, again, to show off like recreated spells, and instead of doing you know, a triple tech, I wanted to show off characters doing their own stuff. So like Chrono's doing Luminaire. There's actually a little gap at the top, like it's like doing the part where it like expands out and is like disappearing. I also had Marl do Haste, which had a transparent cylinder, and I actually tried to make the spinning clock in 3D, so that's an element that I was... this was just, like, out of all her spells, that was the only one that had, like, a 3D element to it, so that's why I picked that. And Robo is doing a version of Shock. I had to create the triangle myself. There is no sprite for that, so that was me just playing around with geometry and trying to figure out how to make that little triangle myself. And it wasn't hard. It was just like took a little bit of doing. And the lightning effect, those actually were sprites, and I just made a few, what is that, like 2 or 3 different horizontal planes, and put a little bit of transparency on it to just make it look more shocky. I don't know. But yeah, ultimately that's and I also put, instead of putting everybody in front of Lavos, I put Chrono on one side, and it gave everybody a little bit more room to kind of wiggle around and do stuff. Okay, Doom 2 was also a request, and unfortunately, like, even if you full screen, this model ended up being huge, right? I already created the final boss, and you can't see anything, because creating the arena and the actual size of the boss and everything else, it's just too big. But like, you'll have Doom Guy in the middle, he's firing rockets at the boss, and the boss is actually firing those like skull cubes back at him, and those are represented in there. You can't really see them. I almost didn't put this in here simply because of, you know, how tiny everything is, but Kako demons, pinkies. There's a bunch of dead enemies on the floor, and of course I had the severed head, like Easter egg in there as well, just because it's part of the game. So I just wanted to put that in there. And I like the model, but again, it's just ended up being way too big. Now, if you're in Blockbench and are just looking at the model, you can just freely zoom around and look at everything, and it looks fine. But when you're exporting it and trying to, get everything in frame so you can see everything, it's too much. Going on to something a little more reasonable, Rygar, which was also a request. I just recreated the first level, and I liked it because there was several layers that I could separate the game out into. So there's the sunrise or set in the background, then there's the mountains, and then there's the trees behind that, and then the actual level where all the enemies are, and Rygar himself are actually doing some stuff. But ultimately, it ended up being really cool. I think that if I were to make a change, I would make those tree trunks actual cylinders as well, instead of just 2D things. So I actually had to recreate some of the mountains, because to separate the trees from the mountains, I had to cut them out, but now there's a hole where the mountains should be. So fixing, and that actually happens a lot in these when I'm trying to separate things out. I have to recreate things that basically don't exist behind the thing, and I'll point that out in later models. Galaga was also a request, and this is also a simple model. It was just a matter of putting a few sprites on there, duplicating them a few times, and just moving them where they should probably go. I kind of put a 45-degree angle on everything so that when you're looking at it head on, it seems a little bit more accurate to the actual game. But yeah, the only flat elements on there are the actual plane and the sound attack that one enemy is doing. Yeah. Someone also requested I make Monkey Island. Now, I've got a soft spot for point-and-click adventures, and I wanted to... It's a goofy game, and I wanted to recreate a part that was interesting, and this is one of the ones I chose. In Monkey Island, there's a dueling system in place where how good you duel is based on how well you retort to the taunting of your enemy. And one of my favorite lines was, this is one of the only ones that really has this kind of text in it. And I mean, you can read it. It's just a real fun little game. Now, what's interesting is that it looks like I'm just went to Writer's Resource, grabbed a model, and just threw them in there. But all those models were separate. There's different legs and waist and head and arms, and I actually had to reassemble them from a sprite sheet, which I have done in others. I just forgot about mentioning it till now. So that's pretty much what I did for Monkey Island. Another person requested Pokemon, and I decided what I thought. I'm not a huge Pokemon fan to begin with, but there are things that I do remember, and one of the things I remembered was the boat. I think it's called the Anne or something. What I remember most, or what I thought was going to be fun the most, was the truck. That truck is the one where that playground rumor went around as you could get a Mew from under the truck. So I actually tried to harken back to that, and I put a little sprite back there and color a Mew to kind of represent that. Now I also grabbed some other sprites to litter around the area to kind of liven it up. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of things are represented here, and it turned out pretty good. I don't like how big the ship is for how flat it is, but considering, I feel like it's I wasn't going to be able to do much better than that, at least with my level of skill at the moment. Okay, so this is another request that I have never heard of this game. This is called Legacy of the Wizard. And when I was picking out the scene, especially with games I'm not familiar with, I'll like pull up a long play and just click around. And I saw this one area that I thought looked pretty cool. One of the reasons I actually settled on this because it was a pretty dynamic area. Between the multiple levels, the pillars, and these like these domes in the background, right? I ended up trying to recreate those domes. Now you can see at the top of the domes where the bricks don't really match up. I'm still not really good at like fixing these textures around spheres like this, but at least for now. Sorry about that, it's Discord. Mute that for a bit. Yay, live. But yeah, so Legacy of the Wizard, never heard of this game, but, you know, I found all the things that, you know, are relevant to the game and just put those in there. At least for this area. You know, like, I still have not played this game, but, like, I don't know. I feel like it's about the best I can do. All right, so here is where limitations start really coming into play. I absolutely wanted to do something from Lunar and Lunar 2, but on Spriter's Resource, there are no good resources for Lunar 1. For some reason, the sprite sheets for the characters, locations, enemies, and stuff like that, it's just very, very sparse. So, but for some reason, the GBA like demake had pretty much everything. So I recreated the meeting with Quark, and I feel like it turned out really good. I had to like recreate a lot of the ground stuff, but in the background, but ultimately, like, it's a good representation. And also, I've played Legend. It's a pretty good demake. I feel like one of the best parts about Lunar is the music, and it's compressed pretty bad in Legend, but like aside from that, like, it's like as good as you can make getting that such a huge game on the GBA. So all right, moving down to Bahamut Lagoon. Bahamut Lagoon was one I just decided to do because I think this game is super cool, underrated, and underplayed. It's a tactical RPG where you have dragons and they can fight. And yeah, I just had two different dragons going at it. I recreated one of the attacks that one of the dragons do, and I mean that's about it. It's not complicated. It's just, in fact, there's probably less elements in this model than most others. But I do think just because of the art style and the sprites, it looks like pretty grand. Like it's a lot of cool. They look cool, right? Okay, now here's another one that I feel like ended up being too big, but I was really being I wanted to show Kefka the final fight, like all of him in one model, like all of them, the entirety of the fight. Also, with Final Fantasy VI having so many characters, I was like, I have an opportunity to like have every single character doing something in this fight because of how much room that this boss creates. So you can't see, even on full screen, you probably can't see it, but like every single character is doing something related to what that character does, like in the game, or at least I tried to. Like Locke, I don't know how you represent stealing, so he's using jump, whatever, I don't know. But like if you go through it and look, every character's doing something, right? And like, you know, Strago summoning a meteor, Satsur throwing dice, Realm is copying a part of the boss, Go-Go is mimicking Sabin doing his like blast, Aura Bolt, I believe. Yeah, it's just, there's a lot going on here, and it's just I feel like it's too much for a simple model. Like if you were just looking at this in the in block bench, just like taking your time. Yeah, it looks great, but like I think when you pull out like this, much like Dune 2, it's just a little much. All right, and because I cannot stop recreating Chrono Trigger, here is another scene from Chrono Trigger. It's when you fight Magus, and this is particularly when he's doing Dark Eternal. This was fun to make simply because I got to, you know, mess with transparencies and create this spell in 3D that normally is just shown in 2D. I put all the characters in their like hurt pose and Magus in its casting pose. It's kind of a more simplistic one. Honestly, it took longer to create the walls with the pillars than it did anything else. Like the actual Dark Eternal spell, not that bad. I had to play around with the transparencies, but like it does a really good job of recreating like what that fight is. So there you go. Moving on to Echo the Dolphin, Sega Genesis, great game. Maybe not great game, but I have a soft spot for it. Played a lot of this back in the day, and I'll go ahead and jump a bit here. This is where I finally like settled on, hey, why don't I just put the logo of the game on the backside of the model? Because if you've seen all the ones before this, I guess I did this for Rygar too. I slapped the actual logo on the back of these because those are usually left completely blank. So that's another thing I'd change if I went back to other models. I'd just put the logo or the title screen on the back. All right, but Echo, most of the game's underwater. So I was like, I can try to actually recreate this. So it's basically just a giant block of water with all the things, the reefs, the bubbles, other dolphins swimming around in there. This is actually recreating, like if you first turn on the game before the title screen, this is what is happening. It's like Echo diving around with all of his friends. So before the bad things start happening. So I don't know. I really feel like I don't know. It's just because it's underwater or whatever. It just feels nice. I don't know. It's cool to do like an underwater thing. And sticking with the underwater theme, everybody knows it. Anybody that's played this game knows exactly what this is, and is probably pulling in, you know, bad memories. But you know what? I made it for the meme, right? This is the underwater level with the seaweed in Turtles 1 for NES. Like you probably hearing that like zappy noise now, but I do like, despite from it being just that, I do think it's interesting because there's a lot of dimensionality, like all the edges and blocks and even the seaweed itself. There are 3 different layers, and I actually inverted the colors on the ones in the middle. Because that's what they do when you actually get hit. That's what happens, is they kind of flip between purple and pink. So putting the middle one to the kind of purple color kind of gave it a little bit more pop. And so, yeah, and again, an opportunity to put all 4 turtles on screen where, you know, if you play the game, you can only have 1 turtle on screen at the same time. So I had this opportunity to put all the brothers together at once. So I did. Moving on to Master Blaster. This was another request. There's a lot going on here that I was not expecting. The background, I had to pull the trees out of the background and recreate the background where the trees used to be. The ground was a little bit of work, but the thing of note here, and it might not look big here, but I had to figure out how to get that doorway in the top left where Sophia comes in. And I didn't know how to do that without it being just like flat. So I ended up kind of making a little triangle so it kind of like blends in. So it's like the doorway's not facing you, but it's also not facing perfectly sideways. And I feel like that's a pretty good compromise to get the feeling of, you know, that doorway actually exists there. And that is just a bunch of enemies. Yeah, I like how that turned out. Moving down to what is known as one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive, NES game to exist. But it is a really fun game. This is Little Samson. Great game. what was cool, and this is another one where it's like you never can have all the characters on screen at once, but I can because I have this platform to do it with. But what took the longest is that there is an entire background, that green background. I had no reason to recreate it, but I did from like just because I wanted to try to create it and give it that extra dimensionality to it. And I think it does a good job of representing like the game as a whole. And if you get an opportunity, download the ROM, play it. Don't buy it because it's ludicrously expensive and it's not worth how much they're asking for. So emulate it up, bro. Okay, now remember when I was talking about Mario Land 2, right? 6 golden coins and the Mario's Mansion. This is when I did Super Mario Land. This is what I'm talking about. I did it in grayscale instead, and I think it turned out a little bit better. Everything here is, there's not really a lot to talk about. Just elements of the game kind of crammed together. The only thing that I did differently is that the start of the level with the spaceship that you're riding on, the tractor beam I actually made in 3D. It's actually like a cylinder of like lines. And I also did the same thing for the piranha plant pipe. That is also like round. But aside from that, it's just the game itself. I made it so that there wasn't a background to it. So it's just, the model spinning. And so I put the logo above everything. So at least it's there in some point, at some part. Moving down, another way bigger model than I was expecting it to be. But this is Super Mario Kart for the SNES, right? Recreating this model was mostly just recreating the walls, as well as the bridges. I don't know if you could tell from this far away, but the bridges are in 3D. They're popped out so that like you can see like Koopa Troopas like actually jumping over the gap in the bridge. You can see that, and the rest was just scattering the items about. The ones that I could pull out in 3D, like the coins, I did, but I didn't know how. I don't know if that's even possible to do with the item blocks on the ground, so I didn't bother. But like all the coins are where they are in the map as well, so like it's a proper representation of the actual map. But again, like I said, I'm not gonna stick on this much longer since it's too big to really see any of the details. But yeah, it's a thing. Now, going on to Lunar 2. It was fun recreating this map. Like this is another case of there aren't enough resources. Like you'll notice that in this fight with Galleon, you're supposed to have your entire party, but their sprites don't exist on Spriter's resource. So I just did the best with what I could. This is like Galleon's big attack that he does, so I wanted to try to recreate that. And then I just put Hero in an action pose, like one of his like skills that he does, so it looks like they're fighting simultaneously. All it is just a bunch of sprites plastered all over the place. But honestly, the what took me the longest was recreating this like castle. Like the two buildings on either side and the crenellations around the outskirt took longer than anything else, and it was a lot. It was a lot of work, especially because you'll see how many like angles there are in each of those crenellations going all the way around. But yeah. This is the fight between Galleon and Hero and the party, and soft spot for Galleon. Great villain. Moving down to Terranigma. This is another underplayed game, simply because it just never came out here. There's only like the Japanese and PAL versions. But like if you get an opportunity, I would. This is another one of the like Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia. This is like the third game after that, right? So I mean that should be enough to like get you to be interested. This is one of the boss fights. And the funny thing is the necks of these dragons, uh, they were the sprite at Sprite's Resource was just the dragons like already completed. So I had to make assumptions on what each of those neck pieces would look like and recreate them myself. And I think it looks good. Like, I mean, as best it can for like this kind of like SNES like 3D though, like the way that they use balls to like make limbs or necks or whatever. Also, starfish in the fight. You're fighting on a log. It's just but yeah, if you haven't played this game, play this game. Moving down to Tales of Destiny. This is another one where, limited resources, but I was able to find the stuff to recreate I can't remember if this guy's called Leviathan or whatever, but it's how you get to the underwater dungeon in the game. Everybody's on a boat, and, you talk to the dragon or whatever, and it's been a long time since I played the original Tales of Destiny, but I wanted to have something to represent the game, and I feel like this turned out pretty good. This is representative of the scene. I didn't know how to 3D-ize the boat better than just kind of angle it up towards the dragon and put the hand railings separate from the deck. But yeah, there you go. There's Tales of Destiny. And finally, the last leg, the last Chrono Trigger model I did. This one was, by this time I'm getting pretty fast at putting these out, and this one was like very low effort, but it's just the Kingdom of Zeal. That's it. Just yeah, there's not much to it. You just pulled out the land masses, threw them in there where they would be in 3D space, and also made sure the blackbird was up there. You can see the blackbird flying up in the top left. That's about it. That's the Kingdom of Zeal. All right. Another request was Adventure Island, and this was another case of lacking resources. So I didn't have enough stuff to make anything but something from Adventure Island 3 that I was able to make. Like, I think this is the final boss of 3, and yeah, it's just all the elements of that fight. Normally, you just have to fight the spaceship, and then it's the aliens. But like, whatever. I got to do the thing where I recreate the spikes in multiple layers, so it looks more spiky than normal. But yeah, that's Adventure Island 3. Now these are the ones I just wanted to do for me. This is the Julius fight in Aria of Sorrow. Big fan of Castlevania, or at least modern Castlevania, or Metroidvania style Castlevania, and Aria of Sorrow is like one of the best ones. And Julius is the optional Julius fight was like super cool, so I recreated. This is where he's doing his item crash, and you don't have to use the Panther Soul to get out of it, but I thought it looked cool trying to get away, because it has like a vacuuming effect. So it looks like he's trying to get away by using the Panther Soul. And moving on to Dawn of Sorrow. This was cool because the Dario fight here, you're actually not supposed to fight Dario here. You're supposed to fight the fire demon in the like mirror. So I wanted to have like this like shadow box where you could see the demon in the mirror, and so like it rotates around with the model so you can see the demon back there. And I think it turned out pretty good. Like you can see elements of what Dario does in the fight, as well as Soma using one of the souls. I always thought the giant axe was silly and cool, so I chose that as his attack. But yeah, that's Arya and Dawn. Now, moving on to Aladdin, and I'm gonna take this fight to the grave. SNES version better than Sega version, right? Like, aside from just having better platforming and levels, Sega Genesis, he has got a sword. He has a sword in one scene in the movie, but like in this version, it represents him better because he's like parkouring all over the place. He can handstand, jump on enemies, and do all this flippy dippy cool stuff. And so I recreated part of the first level that had a large area that I could use to put a lot of stuff in the game to show off like pretty much everything, right? So you have Aladdin in the bottom left jumping on an enemy. You have Jasmine at the far right being accosted. Genie's up there about to do something to one of the guards. Abu is where's Abu? Where's Abu? He's top left, like challenging Iago, and Iago's being mad as he often is. And Carpet's there too, right? And it's just a cool model. I pulled out some of the level geometry, like the poles, as well as the platforms. So I gave it a little something something. All right, moving on to Mega Man 1. Yellow Demon, man. Everybody got their butt kicked by this guy at some point, right? And I put each of his, like, I had him like mid teleportation, so like it's all the pieces in the air at the same time. Normally it's like one or two at the time, but like, you know, just to make an action piece, I had a bunch of pieces like moving at the same time. I also chose Elect Man's power because there's, you know, if you know, there's a exploit with the Yellow Demon that if you attack with Elect Man's power and then like rapidly pause while the projectile is going over his eye, it does the damage each time you pause. So you can quick kill him by just rapidly spamming pause. So this is just a reference to that. And this is another case of having to recreate some of the floors and the walls and things that didn't exist. But I decided on this like yellow and orange stripe because like a single pixel of the ground that you do see does have like this orange and white like dotted to it. So I just assumed the entire ground was like that. So that's how I ended up settling on this. And the final model I made was the Battletoads and Double Dragons for this is, I think this is for SNES. I played the Game Boy version, right? And boy, that was rough. But this is a cool game in the sense that like it's a cool crossover and it's actually pretty fun. But what interested me the most was there was that giant round like gears at the top, and I wanted to recreate those because it's just part of the background. So it was just fun to try to create what this would look like in 3D as part of the level, as well as, you know, get the Battletoads and Double Dragons actually attacking, like you know, Battletoad doing the big old boot thing while I think Jimmy over there is doing the elbow drop on the hand, and I already put the hand in like the hurt animation, so it's like he actually got him or whatever. But yeah, that's it. If you stuck through the whole hour and 8 minutes of this, why? I mean, thank you, but why? If this at all interests you, I would direct you over to Brandon James Greer channel, where he does a lot of art, sprite art based things, and he's got a few videos utilizing Blockbench, so you can see someone who's a little bit more knowledgeable and practiced with this stuff actually doing some really cool stuff. So yeah, thanks for checking this out, and I will catch you guys later.